From a homeowner who hides his house behind hay bales to one who lives in a half-demolished building to one who refused to sell his small house for millions of dollars, here are 10 homeowners today who refuse to move at any cost. Edith Macefield is an American woman born in 1921 in the state of Oregon. Since 1950, she has lived in her small house at 1438 46th Street in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle. This World War II veteran wanted only one thing: to live peacefully in her little 100-year-old house until her last days. Except that she made the international media headlines in 2006, describing her as a popular figure of resistance. Resistance to what? We'll explain. In fact, she turned down an offer of $1 million to sell her house to developers who wanted to build a shopping mall. The old lady overcame the noise of the constructions that surrounded her little house, and stood up to the developers until 2008. The year she died, as she wished, in her beloved house at the age of 86 from pancreatic cancer. In the meantime, she had befriended the construction project manager Barry Martin, to whom she left her beloved property. He eventually put it on the market for sale, but so far the house stands as it is, between the concrete buildings. Here's how this tenacious lady became a symbol in the preservation of neighborhoods undergoing intensive modernization. A symbol that even Disney used in 2009, hanging balloons on the roof of the Macefield house to promote the hit movie Up. Mrs. Liang is a Chinese woman living in the Hezhou district, in the city of Guangzhou, northeast of Hong Kong. She has always wanted just one thing: to live a peaceful and simple life in her small 40 square meters bungalow. And it always worked until 2010, when her 47 neighbors were evicted to make way for a huge 4-lane highway on the Haizhuyang Bridge. Their houses were demolished one after the other. Only the small apartment of Mrs. Liang stood up because this woman with a strong character refused all the proposals of the government, of rehousing and of cash compensation to give up her property. Her stubbornness finally paid off. After a battle that lasted more than 10 years, the government dropped its plan to demolish Mrs. Liang's house and finally built the highway around it. Poor Mrs. Liang got what she wanted, but now she lives alone and without neighbors. On top of that, she is constantly subjected to noise and pollution from traffic. Nevertheless, the unusual photos of his house sandwiched between the two lanes of the Haizhuyang Bridge have made the rounds of the internet and have gone viral. The inspiring story of this stubborn woman has aroused much emotion throughout the world, and it teaches us that we can overcome anything with courage and tenacity. Wong is a Chinese man who has always wanted nothing more than to live quietly in the house his family has occupied since 1949. In the province of Guizhou, in the southwest of the Middle Kingdom. More precisely in the village of Zhangdong, which literally means middle cave, where he lives with more than 20 families of the Miao ethnic group in natural caves. Indeed, these villagers have already built several decades ago houses inside a huge cave, the size of an airplane hangar. The government, for its part, has made every effort to relocate them to modern houses, but they do not want to go there under the pretext that the houses in question leak during heavy rains. The access to the village of Zhangdong is very difficult, since it is necessary to take a precarious dirt road that clings to the side of a mountain, above a river, to get there. But Mr. Wong and his neighbors still refuse to leave their unusual houses. Especially since for a few years, they have electricity via cables suspended above the mountains, which allows them to enjoy a certain comfort. They also have an elementary school, and they are especially proud to be the last cave dwellers of China. Now here is a surprising story, which comes to us straight from across the channel. Its main protagonist is a farmer in his 60s named Robert Feiler. His dream was to live in a castle no matter what it took. In order to realize his dream, he will end up putting himself in an unexpected situation, which started with a very ordinary administrative request. In 2002, Robert Feiler submitted a request for building permission, which was refused by the authorities, because his barn could only be used for industrial purposes. He then decided to bypass the rules by starting the construction of his castle, and by hiding the building site behind bales of straw and a tarp. Thus, he built for 2 years, his luxurious property of 4 rooms, with ramparts, turrets, and cannons. And he lived there, in secret, with his wife and son, for 4 years, before the authorities realized the scandal. Far from being discouraged, our squire tried to circumvent the system once again, by applying for a certificate of legality, applicable if no one objects to a newly built property for 4 years after construction. Except the tide turned and the judge ruled that Feiler will be forced to demolish the house within 12 months. Its construction on the sly was a blatant attempt at deception to circumvent the planning process. Robert Feiler lived his dream for 4 years but learned the hard way that no one is above the law. And here is another story of stubborn Chinese owners. This time, it's a couple from the city of Liang in Zhejiang province. Luo Baogan, 67, and his 65-year-old wife stood up against all odds not to leave their beloved home. They found themselves living in a half-demolished building in the middle of a road and fighting a legal battle against the Chinese government that lasted several years. While all their neighbors agreed to move without resistance, the old couple, unfortunately, could not beat the authorities, but still managed to receive generous compensation to finally leave their home. Thus, the two 60-year-olds can finally look forward to a peaceful and comfortable retirement in a decent home. In the city of Guangzhou, in the province of Guangdong, in the south of China, lived three families of close-knit neighbors who, as you will see, care a lot about their homes and their neighborhood. Except that the authorities had planned to destroy the houses to connect the city's road network to a recently opened tunnel under the Pearl River. But the three families refused to give way to the bulldozers. Thus, the planners who could not build the road through the dwellings built them all around. Our stubborn neighbors were able to keep their homes but found themselves living surrounded by a road. The photos of their homes are hilarious and very unique. Some internet users are amused to say that the authorities have given these residents a 360-degree view of the road. Austin Spriggs is an architect. He works with his daughter in a small house arranged as an architectural firm, at 433 Massachusetts Avenue in Washington, USA. A two-story house, which he bought in 1980, that he particularly likes and of which he does not want to part, even when investors offered him at the beginning of the real estate boom of the 2000s, $2 million to sell it, when it was not even worth $200,000. And yet his refusal is unjustified and incomprehensible, especially since Massachusetts Avenue was just a stretch of decrepit land, claimed by homeless people and prostitutes. And the project carried by the promoters who wanted to acquire his house had for goal, not only to modernize this seedy district, but also to make it safe, and specially to make Austin a very rich man. But he didn't give in to temptation and resisted in his office, 5 days a week, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., even when the construction work around it started and made it an island surrounded by a huge hole in the ground. Today the construction is complete and the little two-story house still stands amidst the tall concrete towers. But it no longer belongs to Mr. Spriggs, who ended up selling it in 2011 to a New York company for less than $800,000. I guess he didn't care that much about the house, but he just had a grudge against the first developers who tried to buy it from him. You see this house that stands out in this luxurious residential area. It is located in the city of Suzhou, in the province of Jiangsu, in the east of China. It belongs to an old Chinese couple. They have set themselves the goal of finishing their days there. In spite of the very tempting offers of the developer who built this subdivision of luxury villas, the two old men still refuse to leave the very modest house where they lived their best years of youth. According to China News website, the owners of this house still maintain their normal life despite the daily pressure from the developer, as well as the nearby luxury buildings. This makes their home a nail house, or dingzihu in Mandarin. This is a very common phenomenon in China, as many homeowners refuse compensation from real estate developers to move. The old couple, symbol of resistance, teaches us that money does not always make you happy. In any case, not more than a house full of nice memories. Jung Meiju is a lady who lived a peaceful life in her small apartment in Raian, Zhejiang province, China. She is an uneventful woman who has always avoided problems. Until one day, a real estate developer made him an offer to buy his apartment. He wanted to raise the entire block in which his apartment is located to make way for the construction of a brand new business center. But Jung Meiju refused to leave her home, because she judged that the compensation which was proposed to her was not with the height of its good. And she, who did not like to have problems at all, found herself in a very delicate situation. Indeed, the developer was able to buy all the houses of the district of Jung Meiju, so he started to demolish the big building where her apartment is located, before having to stop everything because her last owner proved to be unshakable and tenacious. Even if she now lives in precarious conditions, without running water or electricity in a ruined building, she remains impassive and intends never to give up. And as long as she does not receive the financial compensation she is asking for, she will not give up. Let's hope that Ms. Jung and the property developer will find an agreement that suits both parties very quickly. This photo that has been making the rounds on the internet is of Shi Yuji, a 68-year-old Chinese woman, who stands one last time, with a face full of sadness and bitterness, in front of her house, before the arrival of the bulldozers. This lady could not see herself being homeless at retirement age, especially since she had stood up to a number of developers who had tried to evict her from her home for several years, to no avail. Indeed, Shi Yuji's house is a nail house, that is, the last remaining house, preventing the realization of a real estate development project. Except that in 2010, Shi Yuji could not, once again, stand in the way of the developers to save his home. Since this time it was the organizers of the 2010 Shanghai World Expo. The 60-year-old was not able to do anything, so her house on the Nanpu Bridge in Shanghai was destroyed on April 10, 2010. To make way for a parking lot for the Shanghai 2010 World Expo. She now lives in a community workers' dormitory. Shi Yuji did not lack courage in her fight for the preservation of her home. But she was confronted with much bigger and more powerful than her. The sad photo of Shi Yuji standing in front of his house shortly before it was demolished has been making the rounds on the internet, and his story has aroused the sympathy of internet users. Let's hope that this sad celebrity has allowed him to rebuild his life and find a decent home. It was 10 stubborn homeowners who refused to move at any cost. Tell us in the comments which one surprised you the most, and if you like this video, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell to get all the notifications.